Shalom, it's Judea Black on behalf of Shalom L'Chaim Purified Drinking Water. They got it is up there. Uh, I believe 2 videos ago we talked about Afro Turks. Before we get into today's segment, let me wrap that thing up, and I got a little. We'll get into that, and then we'll get into what we're supposed to be into today. So yeah, let's get straight there, and I'll see y'all in a second. Cue that music, LA.
Oh, it doesn't seem right that I was born white and my parents don't fight. They just told me they love me each night as I don't lose sleep for the kids sewing my sheets. Oh, the one stitching my sneaks. As long as I can buy them both cheap.
The history of African people in Iran and the surrounding region of the Middle East extends all the way into ancient history. Surprisingly, there is well-documented history about African people living in the Persian and Assyrian empires. They had various professions and played different roles throughout most levels of society. Many of the positions that African people performed in these Middle Eastern empires had to do with the military. It's been recorded that a large contingent of Nubian soldiers were present in the Persian army of Xerxes when he invaded Greece in 480 BC. In fact, it's well documented that Assyrian horses and cavalry were in part supplied and trained by African experts from Kush. Several documents mention Kushite horse experts living in Assyria. Daily cites a Neo-Assyrian text mentioning a Kushite holding the high military office of chariot driver of the prefect of the land. Neo-Assyrian texts even mention Africans working in other jobs in the empire. An economic document mentions 2 Kushite eunuchs with Assyrian names collecting personal debts, and 15 Kushite women are found on a list of foreign female workers that included musicians, temple personnel, scribes, smiths, stone workers, a barber, and a baker. Both these texts come from archives in Nineveh and may date from any time between the beginning of Sargon II's reign in 721 BC and the fall of Nineveh in 612. Even though the Assyrian Empire was primarily based in Iraq, I hope we can all see just how ancient the Afro Iranian presence is, with the clear involvement of Africans in ancient Iranian armies, aka the Persian Empire, coupled with African professionals living and working in the neighboring region of Iraq. It no doubt proves the extensive history of Afro-descended people in that general region, as the modern countries of Iraq and Iran clearly did not exist back then. It's clear that Africans, or more specifically, some of the ancestors of the Afro Iranians, participated in and contributed to the development of 2 of the most iconic civilizations of the Middle East. Even though there is an ancient and medieval presence of Afro-descended people in Iran, most Afro Iranians seem to descend from the Persian Gulf slave trade of the 19th century, with a sizable portion originating from the Swahili coast. The demand for enslaved people seemed to have increased during this time. The demand for enslaved peoples increased in Iran during the 19th century for 2 main reasons: declining population growth and economic stagnation, largely due to the impacts of disease and famine, along with the harsh climate and bureaucratic mismanagement at the local level. Despite there being no reliable figures, some scholars estimate that around 2,000 to 5,000 Africans were sold in the Persian Gulf annually in the 19th century, some of whom did not survive the journey. Most enslaved Africans were brought into the Gulf on boats belonging to Arabs from the eastern and western coasts of the Persian Gulf and the Ottoman Empire, as well as those living in the port of Lenga. Although most Afro-Iranians seem to have come from the Swahili coast region, a sizable amount also came from Ethiopia. Ethiopian Christians were among the most popular enslaved people traded by Somali traffickers. The Ethiopians who were transported through Persian Gulf trade were characterized into groups based on profession, many of whom were ironworkers, carpenters, domestic servants, bodyguards, and more. However, Afro-Iranians were not just brought into Iranian society for forced labor, but also for the arts. Many enslaved Africans were selected not only for their age, gender, and physical strength, but also for their musicality and ability to perform. Indeed, African dance and music were prevalent in Iranian society, and the former enslaved people were gradually formed into distinct and specialized artistic groups of dancers and singers. Enslaved African entertainers performed in royal courts, weddings, and had various street performances garnering big crowds. Interestingly enough, enslaved Ethiopians contributed to Iranian society in a unique way, bringing their distinct Ethiopian traditions with them. The enslaved Oromos and Rajas of Ethiopia in Northeast Africa introduced into the Iranian society many unique traditions, such as the Zar, Liwa, and Gawat ceremonies. After liberation, Afro Iranians either stayed in Iran or were sent away by the British to other locations such as India or Zanzibar. Those who stayed in Iran understandably found difficulties transitioning into Iranian society for various reasons. Within cities, Afro Iranians tended to live in separate quarters. The so-called Black District featured many religious ceremonies. Even though Afro Iranians brought new dynamic cultures and unique liveliness to Iran, at times many have felt invisible in their own country. Despite this, their extensive history and contribution to the region cannot be denied.